Here to talk about using sociocracy in my business. How amazing, because 6 months ago I was still saying, oh, I'd like to try sociocracy in my business. And we actually have been using it. And so I'm going to share a little bit of that journey with you tonight. So why did I decide to use sociocracy in my business? Well, I've always been a strong believer that more brains are better. And I really wanted to benefit the most from all the great people that I had in my business and make it more successful. And I heard that businesses are more successful if they use sociocracy. So I thought, well, great, that has to be a win-win. So I was curious about it, but I was also a little bit nervous, and I was kind of intrigued to think, well, how could it work when the buck stops with me? You know, I'm the one who's financially responsible, and how can I trust the other people, the employees, to make financially wise decisions when they're not the ones that are responsible for that? You know, how can I safeguard the financials if I give over power for decisions? But I was assured by different consultants who I spoke to that I could still participate in every decision, and no decision would be made without my consent. So therefore it was okay to do. But I was still concerned about, well, would we waste time, and, you know, would it become a tussle, and all sorts of things. Another reason that I wanted to try using sociocracy was because my team seemed frustrated. I was getting the message that they weren't feeling heard, although I felt that I listened to their ideas, but I didn't necessarily implement them all, but they really felt that they weren't being heard or taken seriously. And I wanted more buy-in and commitment from them. And so I thought, well, probably I would get that if we use sociocracy. So I decided to try some elements of sociocracy and see how it went. So the way we started was we started by holding a picture forming workshop. And we had an external consultant to come and run that. That was Gina Price. And that gave it some real credibility because it was an external person. So, you know, we all took it seriously, and we committed a full 3 hours to it. It's the first time ever I've stopped the whole business and put the answer phone on and had everybody there for a full 3 hours. It was a big commitment, but it was really great. It released all the tension that people were holding and feeling unheard. We spent 3 hours going around the circle, hearing everyone's ideas and going around again. There was ample time for everyone to speak, and everything was recorded. And I think that was very cathartic for some of them who'd been feeling this frustration of our voices aren't being heard. They really were heard. They were written down, and then the list was consolidated. And so it was a very positive process in that way. And after that, everyone kind of had the feeling that they had some expertise in the process of sociocracy because, you know, they'd been there with the consultant, they'd learned how picture forming was done. It was a really good start to do it in that big process. So the question then was, what next? How could we bring it more into the business? And the question that was a little bit difficult was how to structure it, because we're a small team, just about 8 people, and some of them off-site, and some employees, some consultants. And I had shown them one of the little videos of SOFA, and their response had been, well, if you do all that double linking in all those groups, it's just, you know, there's not enough people to do all that. So I wasn't sure how to structure it to take the next step. And the way it happened for me was a little epiphany I had. I was frustrated with the area of print advertising, that nobody seemed to be owning that particular task, and it sort of fell between 3 stools all the time, and it wasn't really happening. And one day I just realized, well, what if 3 or 4 of us got together who all hold a piece of it, and we had a work group that meets regularly to just focus on print advertising? And I thought, yeah, that might really work. And then I thought, well, what other groups are there that need that? And I quite quickly thought of all these other groups that really needed a specific focus, that it would be good to have a few people doing it. So this is what I came up with. And it started at the bottom with those 10 groups, those 10 squares that you can see there. So it was print ads, Google ads and websites, a social media group, an online sales group, an appointment setting group, listener support group for post sales, sales and VIP group, a distributors group, a lectures group, and a research group. And I, just thought about who would I like in each of these groups, 3 or 4 people, and selected them and wrote it all up. And that was great. But then I thought, well, how are we going to put this together if we have a double link from 10 different groups into a central group? Well, that would need 20 people. We don't even have 20 people. How are we going to make the structure work? And so I thought we need fewer, we know fewer satellites to link into a central group. So I realized that all these work groups could be grouped into 3 clusters. So we'd have a lead gathering cluster, a sales and service cluster, and a professional marketing cluster. And that made a lot of sense. But then if those clusters were each going to meet, I mean, already 10 groups is a hell of a lot of meetings. If we're going to have another 3, it's just going to be too many. And I quickly started hearing feedback from the team of too many meetings. They didn't want to spend this much time in meetings. They just thought it was a bit of a waste. It was too scattered. So my plan was that the clusters wouldn't actually meet. They would be theoretical clusters who had a leader, and that we would then have a delegate. And my consultant, Gina, advised me it was really important to elect a delegate from each cluster. I had appointed the 3 leaders. I was one of them. And I thought, we could just leave it like that. But Gina said, no, you've got to have a delegate. And she educated me about the importance of selecting a delegate using the Sociocracy selection process so that they really feel that they have a voice, that everyone in that cluster has a voice that they are sending to the marketing circle, because this is so important in the team, as it is for everyone, that you have a voice, that you're represented. And I really registered then the importance of the delegate, the difference between the delegate and the leader. And people are really committed to, this is our delegate, and they're going to go and represent us and take our voice, and that's got to be done. So I agreed. And what we were going to do was have each cluster meet just once for the purpose of selecting a delegate. And then we would just have the delegate and the leader working, and we would form the marketing general circle where decisions will be made at a higher level of the business. So the process of adapting the structure to work for our business was an interesting process, because it looked like there would be too many links in the small team. Now, we never did select the delegates, or I shouldn't say we never did. We haven't yet. We haven't yet got to that point, and we haven't started the marketing general circle. It hasn't met. We just haven't got to it. We've been flat out having the 10 circles meet, and that's been great. So that's been the experience so far. I haven't said we're not doing anything further, but that's how far we've got so far. But there has been a bit of a chorus of too many meetings over the last 6 months that we've been doing that. And perhaps one of the reasons too that I didn't start and really call a meeting of the marketing general circle is I wasn't sure about sharing the decisions, the larger decisions of the marketing direction, because I don't really have people as employees with a lot of marketing expertise. It's more consultants that we're drawing on for that. And so I wasn't really sure, who would we have in this group, and doubling up, paying consultants for additional meetings, and just didn't quite make sense at this stage for this stage of the business. But I just want to divert for a moment here before I come back to the story of the business and do a comparison between using Sociocracy in a business versus in community. As Jerry mentioned, I'm also involved in a community, the Narara Eco Village, where we use Sociocracy in a very conscious way. So let's look at some of the comparisons and the differences between Sociocracy in business versus community. So starting with the first line here, time is money. This is a fact in business, and that's one of the reasons I was wary about Sociocracy. It's spending all this time in meetings, is it really going to pay off? And I think there's a resistance from some of my people because they feel like this is wasting my time. I want to get on with my job, and here I am sitting in a meeting. Whereas in the Eco Village, no one's paying people to sit in the meeting. They're there because they want to, because they have agency and their time is freely given. So it's a different feeling. So in the business, perhaps there's less agency. I have to ask them, is it tokenistic? I've asked the people to be there and express an opinion, but do they really feel their opinion counts? And that's still a question at times, I suppose. Whereas in the Eco Village, there's an absolute ownership of the process. People really feel, well, I'm a member and I have a voice and it's important, and they're there to be heard. So they come from a different place with that. In the business, there's less depth of understanding of the Sociocracy process. Well, partly because of the time we've been involved in it. In the community, there's a real commitment, and that's growing through depth of practice over time. We've only been using it for 6 months so far in the business, whereas in the community we have 10 years of practice. So we're at a very different level in that way. In the business, because it's a small team, there are too few people for all the roles required if you have a, an extensive structure. Whereas in the community, the structure works very well. For the size that the community is, we have over 100 adults, and there's no problem there with having enough people for the roles, although many people still play duplicate roles in some situations. And in the business, I think the adapted structure that we've made is good. It's useful, it's a good step, but perhaps needs paring down or, tailoring a bit more. In the business, in the community, we have the steering circle at the centre, and that is very effective and important. And I'm going to show you now a picture of the structure that we have in the community. So we have these major hubs around the steering circle, and they were all functioning before the steering circle was formed. So we sort of built from the bottom up, as I'm also doing with the business. So each of these has a leader, and then they have a delegate linked to the steering circle. So there are double links for every major policy group with the steering circle. And then these bullet points on the side, some of them are work groups. They're work groups or they're areas of function within these larger hubs. So it's quite a comprehensive structure, and it's really running well. There's so much commitment to sociocracy, and that's growing, and the skills are growing, and I think we are becoming a pretty good active example of using sociocracy for this purpose. So coming back to the story of the business, what happened next? Well, COVID happened next. And in my business, the result of COVID is we had to reduce hours to make ends meet. Well, I had to reduce staff hours. I increased my hours, but I had to reduce staff hours because we did have a drop in sales when COVID hit. And what happened was we just greatly reduced the number of meetings. We simply didn't have time to hold all those meetings. So 3 or 4 of them are still going on, but a lot of them just have sort of been left by the wayside for the moment. And with some, we're just carrying on with the task, but not having the meeting at the moment. Now, something else that I've noticed in terms of just what's been happening in the business is the knowledge that optimizing sales results in more work hours, the optimizing sales results in more work hours is very motivating for the team. So they know if we make a certain level of sales, they'll get their work hours back. But, when the sales are reduced, I had to reduce the work hours. So I suppose it's galvanised their commitment even more. They were always very committed. They're a fantastic team who I'm really grateful to work with. I would never say they're lacking commitment, but there's even more focus for them probably of we've got to make this a success so that, we still have a full job. And for me, I'm also working harder along with everyone else. So we're very focused, and it's been quite a positive time for us as well. Even though it's been difficult, people having to do their work in less hours and having to use up some of their different forms of leave to get by. So that's what we've been doing. Now, in preparation for this presentation, I really wanted to get the voices of the team included. And so I did a little survey, and I asked them all 2 questions. What's been good about using sociocracy in the business, and what hasn't worked so well? So I'm going to share their answers here. So Wendy said that she was pleasantly surprised at all the positive ideas and solutions that come out of sociocracy, which is great to hear that she perceives it that way. On a negative side, she said time is the problem, especially with reduced hours. It's almost impossible to find the time for the meetings. Isabel said what she appreciates is everyone being able to have a say, and that was great to hear because that was certainly one of the complaints I was hearing earlier. And so that's been a positive. She said it's hard to get used to not being able to all talk at once, and she finds she forgets what she's going to say by the time her turn comes around. So, this is all practice for people. Joan said she did like it when she got to have input, and there was one particular meeting we were discussing a process, and I remember everyone, there was time for everyone to really put in their input, and she seemed to enjoy that meeting. But in a general way, she said often she feels she doesn't get enough input as other voices are more dominant, and she also said she doesn't see the necessity of their involvement, and the meetings are either too long or too rushed. Karen said everyone has an equal opportunity to express opinion, which was great because sometimes she was a bit hesitant about expressing her opinion earlier, but in the rounds, I think everyone's gained more confidence. But she doesn't like sociocracy for this business because there are too many micro groups. Sharon said it opens up ideas in areas that had fallen away. That was great feedback to hear, because there have been a lot of positive initiatives that have come out of it, and I'm glad that she perceived that too. But she said, again, too many meetings for a small group, and also decisions get held up to wait for the next meeting. I wasn't aware that was an issue for her, so it was good to hear that. And Andrea said the different groups are able to focus on what's relevant to their area, and that's good. But again, too many groups for a small organisation. So this was definitely a resounding message I'm getting, that a lot of people think there are too many groups. So I found it really an eye-opener to get this feedback and to hear where everyone was. And it made me realise there's more to be drawn from developing the feedback in our culture and really hearing people's concerns and input in order to improve what we're doing. So that was really great. So what did I notice? Well, I was quite surprised and delighted at how, when we started having these little work groups, the process would shine the light on each little corner of the business, which was needing attention. And all these little corners and processes hadn't been getting their due attention, but with a group of people sitting down to just look at this area, it was quite remarkable what we generated, how many positive initiatives came out of it. And some of our external consultants were able to become much more engaged in the team, enabling us to access their specialist skills more fully and really, you know, merge the team with those expert consultants, which was fantastic. I found myself more engaged and working harder to carry out all the initiatives. And I was delighted that when I think about it, people have stopped complaining about not being heard. So the process of just having all of these meetings where their opinion gets asked and we do rounds, they feel more heard, which is great. And I've noticed that what sometimes happens is we'll come to group and someone might put a proposal, which I think, no, I'm not going to agree with this. I don't agree at all. And we do a round and I hear everyone's point of view. And by the time I've heard everyone's point of view, I say, yes, I agree with it, because they bring light from all the different angles. So it really has changed the balance of power a little bit. And, you know, everyone's voice is counting more, not just my voice. So that's really been a benefit. And overall, I think people do feel more engaged and valued in the business. The difficulties, it needs more buy-in from the team to help fit the tool to the needs. You know, we need to tweak the number of meetings. And at times I found we generated more tasks than we had the time or finances to resource. So we may need to build up a little bit more slowly to the level of achievement that we were trying to do. There have been some improvements to our systems along the way. One is that I put out an offer of profit share to the team. After putting this in motion, it just felt like the right thing to do. It feels like they're more engaged. I wanted to honour them in that way, so that's on the table. Some technical improvements were added by the team. So an auto-inviting system was created for the calendar to make it easier to book our meetings. A task list was added to the agenda, and we revised the way of replicating agendas. So we use a new document each time. That tidy. So that was really great that they, you know, really stepped in and made the system work better in those ways. So what will I do next? What will we do next? Well, I'm going to go back and ask them when you know, the crisis has passed and people get a few more of their hours back and we resume this a bit more actively. I'm going to ask them how we can make it better specifically. So if they're saying there are too many meetings, well, which ones should we have? And how can we make those meetings work better? And ask them to commit to the improvement. So really review their willingness to take on the roles, just a little bit more ownership, I think we can see with me responding to this feedback. I'd like the group leaders to take more responsibility for organising the agendas, booking the meetings, so that doesn't fall to me so much. The secretary to really be ready and on deck. And for everyone to think about how we can make the group useful to really improve the business results and improve and achieve the aims of the groups. And I think it will be a good time to revisit the aims of the groups now with a little bit of hindsight and say, what are the aims? How can we really focus on those and achieve them? So that's about all I want to cover, but I would love to have some discussion. So I don't know where my, oh no, sorry, one more slide. I don't know how that blank got in there. Okay, so just my wrap up and then we'll have discussion. It made us feel more like a team. I really think that it's achieved that. Everyone became more engaged. The business benefited more from everyone's skills and observations, which is what I hoped would happen. I do believe the bottom line has improved. There have been some great initiatives and I think that's helped us and we're doing better. And really, this is just the beginning of integrating sociocracy into the business. I think we need to improve the culture of feedback, because I find at the ends of the meetings when we do the feedback, it's a little bit light on. People haven't quite learned how they can give constructive feedback to improve the process all the time. And I think we can practice that more. So people need more commitment to really creating and owning decisions. It's possible that some of our monthly meetings should be quarterly. That might help reduce that feeling of overwhelm with all the groups. And maybe we need to distinguish between policy groups and work groups. That's something we probably can clarify. So would I recommend sociocracy for a small business? Absolutely. I think that it's completely adaptable and it's rich in potential and it's really worth doing. And the thing is, the model can be tweaked and honed and made to work for whatever business it's used in. One of my friends at Rara Eco Village often says, if it's not flexible, it's not sociocracy. And I think that's a good philosophy, and let's make the tool work for us because we can.